These are the tools I used during this repair video. Greetings, YouTube world. I'm going to do a DIY video here on how to replace the heating element in a Frigidaire Affinity Ultra Capacity dryer. The model number, as far as I can figure out for mine, is a FAQE7072CL. The reason I'm guessing is because the label that shows the model number normally is right here. Mine has disappeared over the years. It's not written or stamped anywhere else on this thing that I can find, so I had to dig around on the internet, and my best research tells me that's the model number. But there are 3 different models of this. This is the low end one, the Ultra Capacity. They have 2 others that have a little water attachment on the back that I guess spritzes some steam in there, but the point of this video is going to be replacing the heater element, which is a common repair for this type of dryer. And so I'm going to go ahead and run through it because I couldn't find one that made me happy, so I'm going to do one that makes me happy, and I hope you enjoy this one. First thing first, of course, is, get it out, unplug it, get it out where you can work on it. I'm fortunate to have a nice garage, so we'll just run through what I've done, and we'll keep going until I get finished, and you can watch all my mistakes along the way. Now, you can do this whole operation using a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. However, there are a whole bunch of screws you're going to have to remove throughout the process. So if you've got one of these handy dandy screwdrivers, electric jobs that you can lay your hands on, it'll make things go a whole lot faster. They all appear to be the same size screws, so if you've got one of these little magnetic containers, you can chunk those suckers right in there, and that way as you go along you won't lose anything. Again, according to the other videos I've looked at, this is going to be necessary because there's a single Phillips head screw on the back side of the heating element that's in a spot that's very difficult to get to or get enough torque on it to unscrew it. You'll be coming at it at right angles, obviously. So one of these is going to be necessary, or if you have a small ratchet that has the ability to hold a screwdriver bit, number 2 Phillips screwdriver bit, that might also be very effective. I'm going to try that myself when I do this video, but this is something else you're going to need, or something similar. First thing that any of the other repair videos I looked at told you had to do was to remove 2 screws from the back to release the top so that you can slide it back and then remove it from the top of the dryer. The second thing that most all of them tell you you've got to do is remove a couple of screws that holds the front control panel on. Now, I noticed as soon as I took mine off that the previous repair guy who replaced the heating element almost 4 years ago, either he did it or it just failed on its own due to age and whatever. But if you notice, this tab here should be holding on with this screw, and the tab is broken off. It's been gone for a while. But this is the screw you're going to remove so that you can then lift and take that off. Here's the other side, and you can see there are some stress cracks on this little tab, so don't mess with that one. This is the one you need. Okay? Once you remove it, those screws, this is going to come off pretty easy, and you're going to need to roll this over onto the top because this wire here needs to be unplugged from this little thing here. And if you look down there, you can see there's a tab that you pull down to release. Just pull that down, slide this out, and then you can remove this and put it in a safe place. What you're going to need, or I would highly recommend, is to get your shop vac out or your regular vac, or borrow one, or whatever you got to do, because when you open this up, I've already cleaned it, but mine was covered, especially along here and here on the drum, and then all these areas. All this stuff has got, you know, dryer lint forever. So you clean as you go, and it'll help reduce the mess. And I think you'll find it'll be an easier job as you go to do it versus waiting until you've got it all open, but you deal with it how you wish. Next step is to remove these screws here and here, here and here, and then you're going to need to do 2 more that are up underneath this edge, and you're going to find 4 screws. You need to be careful which one you remove. The one that's stuck through that silver tab, that's what holds the main dryer onto this pedestal. The one to the left is what goes through the faceplate of the dryer, and that's the one you need to pull out. One on each side. Take those only, not the ones in the clips. And I'm going to pull these first so that once I get these removed, it'll be easier to lift this whole assembly off of the dryer. Alright, so after you remove those 6 screws actually, again, this was fixed once before by somebody else, and I don't know how or why, but there are supposed to be 4 clips, or hangers, I guess, that are attached. One here, one should be here, one should be here, and one should be down here, and they're supposed to go in these holes in the frame to hold this in place as you're taking those screws out. Well, I don't know whether that guy broke them, removed them, whatever, but there's only one left. So when I took that last screw out of the top, it basically almost tried to fall out on me. So you shouldn't have to worry about that if yours hasn't been messed with or it was done by somebody who knew what they were doing, but mine wasn't quite that way. So once you get this free though, you're going to need to disconnect this connector right here, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to come out, so I'm going to do that, and then I'll get back with you and show you what I did. Okay, I attempted to remove this. It looks like it should come out. I could not get it to release easily, so I went ahead and just disconnected these 2 wires from these 2 connectors. They're 2 different sizes, so you can't mix them up, and they just pull straight off. And then I disconnected this connector here from this connector down there, and again, it's strictly squeeze these 2 like this and then pull straight out. Okay, and then you can take this whole front assembly here and move it off to the side. So because I'm kind of learning as I'm going, I'm gonna, you know, the goal here is to get at this heating element, which is right back here. All right. The goal is to get at that without having to pull the drum out. And I think I should be able to do that once I get past this little vent thing here. To remove it, it looks like I've got to remove this little bracket thing here, which holds your lint filter. Now, in the past, the screws that hold this stripped out, so mine's loose, but yours may still be tight, so you'll need to pull out 2 Phillips head screws from each of those spots. And hopefully my video has been clear enough as to where those are. All right, so I've removed the filter holder and the filter holder, and pulled that out, and of course I found one of these little puppies underneath, so we're going to remove that, and that hopefully will allow this whole thing to come off, because it seems pretty ready to come off right now. Okay, FYI, you need to make sure that you support this piece right here as you remove that screw, because the way this thing is weighted, once that screw releases, this thing drops straight off. Okay, so be ready for that so that it doesn't drop and fall on your foot like it did to me. And oh, by the way, just so you can see, this is what you're going to find if you've been using this thing for any length of time. This stuff is going to be full of this. And of course, you know, we use water softener, or I'm sorry, we use clothes softener here, and that tends to build up as the years go by. And so this is the kind of thing that's going to be in here that you're going to need that shop vac for. And that's why I said it's a good idea to have one or borrow one if you can. All right, remember earlier mentioning that everybody says you need to get in here and vacuum and clean out the garbage that's collected over the years, and obviously, as you can see, that's been the case with mine. I've already pulled 59 cents in change out of this thing that I can see. Now I'm going to get in here with a flexible hose and attach to my vacuum and try to clear out as much more of this stuff as I can. And of course, way back there in that, let me see if I can zoom in on that. Way back here is that infamous screw that they all mention is such a pain to get out. Now this one looks like it's about half backed out already. I don't know. Oops, focus is out. Sorry. Anyway, I'm going to try and vacuum out, and then I'll go to work on that screw as my next step. We're down to the guts of this thing. As you can see, I've cleaned out as much of it as I could, and now we're ready to work on actually getting this heating element out of here. So again, the other videos I watched, you know, you're pulling the entire drum out so you can get access to these screws, and they have you taking this plate off first and then that screw in the back, and that releases the heating element. Of course, I can't really get at these screws in here, so what I'm going to do is deviate. I'm going to remove these 2 screws here that hold this this mounting stand, and then of course I'll remove the screw way there in the back, and then from that point I'm guessing I'll have to start disconnecting wires such as that one, possibly some of these, to remove this unit completely out of there. But first going to start with 3 screws, Phillips head, and move on. Lesson learned, take the that black wire that was on the right hand side. It's a 3/8 nut and washer. Remove that first, because otherwise you won't have enough slack to pull it even to the point that it's at now. So now that I've removed that wire, I can get it to this point, and at this point I can start further disconnecting, because the wires are at about their maximum extension at this point. And so I'm going to take these 3 white ones off first, and then start working on removing the sensor and thermostats that have to be removed from this heater unit and transferred to the new one that you install. Alright, so I'm looking at my replacement part, and I'm looking at this part before I disassemble everything, and I want to make sure that I point out that the wiring, you know, you need to pay attention. At least on mine, you have a gray wire that connects to this top terminal, and then you have 2 greenish gray wires that connect to the center and lower, and I cannot see a difference between the 2 green gray, grayish green, whatever, that connect to those. Now I'm going to assume, and you know what that means, that the previous repair guy, when he installed this replacement heating element 4 years ago, that he's the one that marked that wire on the bottom with some magic marker to give himself the cue that that's the one that goes at that location on the replacement heating element. Okay, so however you want to do it, just be sure that you get those wires connected in the correct order, particularly these 2 on the lower 2 mounts. So, using a pair of needle nose pliers, I removed these 3 wires from these 3 connectors, which allowed me to now bring this all the way out to this position here, which will give me better access to these 2, which I have to remove from this to do the full replacement. So by gently wiggling and gently bending and only slightly cursing a couple of times, I managed to get this unit all the way out to this point, which is about the max extension now of the wires that are installed, which gives you better access to these screws holding these items on. Once these are out, then we can remove the whole unit and finish changing this over and this over to the new replacement, and then we get ready to slide it all back in. Alrighty, we've now got the these 2 sensors removed from the heating element. I wanted to point out the fact that the 4 screws that hold these 2 devices on here are different than the other screws that hold this whole beast together. So don't get these mixed up with the other ones. The thread pitch on this is much finer than the other sheet metal screws they use to hold the whole thing together. So keep that in mind, keep these separate. I'm going to lay them right down in there because that's a nice spot and they don't go anywhere. Okay? While I was putting the repair video together, I realized I had failed to discuss and show the removal and transfer of a couple of the parts from the old heating element to the new replacement heating element. You had the 2 legs that are they kind of come up, it's a U, and then it comes back down, and then you had that plate that also was in place, and you can see in the video. Those are secured by 2 screws. You have to come in from behind the plate, remove those 2 screws. You can take those 2 components off, and then you add them back to the new heating element, and then of course you put those 2 sensors back in along the side, using those unique fine thread screws that I talked about in the earlier section of the video. Okay, so I've got all the wires hooked up. I've got the stuff installed. Everything's ready to go. Now I did notice one thing back here on this wire, right there. You may notice that there's a little cut in the electrical tape wrapped around it. That's because when this thing's installed, that wire bundle right there rests against the edge of this leg, and it doesn't look like it's cut through, but this is sharp enough, and with the vibration it appears that there's been some abrasion. So I'm going to throw some tape, electrical tape, right around here just to give it a little extra something to rub against instead of that hard metal edge. Just FYI. One of the videos I watched, which was very well done. It was just a different model than what we're dealing with here. One of this guy suggested removing from your old heating element, removing one of these 1/4-inch sheet metal screws, and then using it as the screw that holds the very back end of this tube in the dryer. And that way you can use a ratchet with a 1/4-inch socket instead of trying to get a stubby Phillips in there, which doesn't give. To be honest, doing that little trick of using the 1/4-inch drive screw that we scabbed off of the old heater, it does work, but let me tell you, I have found so far that getting that little screw to restart in that little hole from way out here to way back there to be the most difficult thing I've had to do on this whole project so far. It's ridiculous. So I learned a couple things. Number one, put that screw in first. Do not, set these feet or screw them in or anything, because you're going to have to move this whole tube around to get that stinking hole to line up with that other stinking hole so you can get the stinking screw in, okay? I also learned that I just used a nail first to get the tube holes lined up, and once I got them lined up, then I very gently backed the nail out, very carefully pulled my arm out and got the screw. I still couldn't get it to set, so I wound up having to use the original screw by hand just a little bit to get it started, to get the hole perfectly lined up. Then I came back out carefully and then went in with the little 1/4-inch drive screw, and it finally, after multiple backouts and returnings, it finally went in. And then I got my little trusty 1/4-inch drive and went in there, and it snugged up. So just FYI, that's how I did it. It seemed to work better. I would strongly recommend leaving those two mounting points unattached so you can move this around as much as you need. Alright, one final check. All of our wires are all snugged up, tightened up. Our mounting screws are in. Our black wire is connected with its 3/8-inch nut. The back screw, 1/4-inch drive sheet metal screw now is secure. Oh, by the way, that still has a Phillips head end to it, so if I don't have a 1/4-inch or whatever, I can use the Phillips if I still want to. Everything's cleaned out as best I can get it, so I'm going to go ahead and start buttoning things back up in reverse order. So now I had to put that housing back on. It uses a single screw that's right up underneath here, okay? And it is different than the standard screws that they use. It's a kind of a chrome plated job. So you've got one of those chrome plated ones there, and then you have two of those chrome plated ones here, okay, and then you have the regular sheet metals at the top corners and underneath. Now I would suggest, after putting this back together, that you do these first if possible, because these are the hardest ones to line up from underneath. Particularly this one was a off for me. So I had to start with that one first, then did this one, and then put in the other four up here and snugged everything down. So we're basically set to go there, and then we'll reconnected the plug that's down at the bottom, that 3-wire plug, and then this one here that we disconnected before we took this part off. So now we're going to reconnect the control panel and then put the top back on, and if all is well, we're going to fire it up, and it's going to cook some clothes and not give me the E64 error message. Let's find out. All right, so again, you know, you basically just drop this in, make sure that these two brackets here and here line up, and then don't forget to plug this plug in, run it through this channel before you put the lid back on. Everything's back together. I've searched my workbench. I can't find any extra screws, nuts and bolts, so I'm assuming that I've got this thing all put back together and it's ready to function. So now the fun part is trying to squeeze that thing back into its rightful place, which of course, like most of us I'm guessing, is a tight squeeze. It's a pain getting it in there, getting things plugged up and vent connected and everything else. So a little trick, you know, I've had to do a vent stack that goes up through my drop ceiling or my garage ceiling, and then through the attic up to the roof and out a vent on top of the roof. But getting that connection and keeping the flexible tube from falling down and getting caught along with the plug while I'm trying to wedge it back in there, this is what I've come up with. I always use one of those dryer vent twist type clamps. So I've got that clamped on there. I tie a piece of string to it. I hook the electrical cord into it. I put a loop in it, and I hang it off the knob, so that as I work this thing back in there, I don't have to worry about the wire and the vent dropping down where I can't get it. And then I can crawl up on top and make the final plug-in and connections. And so just a little something you might want to think about if you got to work in a tight space. All right, YouTubers, I just ran it for 30 minutes on high, and it did not give me an error message. Prior to replacing the heating element, I couldn't get more than about 5 to 8 minutes out of it before it would quit working and throw the code E64. So looks like we have success. It's running, it's not making weird noises, and so I hope this video will be helpful to those of you who have this particular type of Frigidaire Affinity dryer, and we'll catch you next time. Here's the one that I just pulled out, and I don't know if you can see how twisted and warped the coils are in this one that just apparently has failed. Okay, I'll show the other end of this, but I'm trying to show you down from the top. So here's the one I just pulled out, and then this is the one that I'm getting ready to install. And as you can see, of course, everything is much straighter and squared away. You know, the coils are where they're supposed to be, and all those little ceramic stands or standoffs is what holds those coils out and keeps them in, supposed to keep them in position to prevent shorts and things like that, which is apparently the main problem with these, is they warp and then they touch the side of the tube and it shorts them out and they're dead. So let me flip these over and you can take a look at the bottom, and we'll talk more about parts. So here we go again, looking at the other end of the one that has failed. You can see how that mounting plate has warped way over to one side, and these coils, of course, as they heat up, they expand and contract over and over and over again. And you know, at some point, like this one right here at the very bottom, can, I guess, actually touch the side and cause it to short. Now I don't see any evidence, you know, it's not like there's an arc there or whatever, but I'm just showing you what that looks like. And of course here's the brand new out of the box replacement part that I'm going to install. Now you know, us do-it-yourselfers tend to look for the least expensive source of supply for our replacement parts. You know, it makes sense. If you can get something cheaper that works and does the job, great. I will just point out that in certain cases it pays to pay. I looked online at multiple you know, Amazon sources for these heaters. I looked at other sites for sources for replacement heating elements, and you know, there was one that was selling, quote unquote, a genuine Frigidaire replacement part, and they were selling it for $101. Everybody else was selling theirs for somewhere between $24 and $39. Now, somebody that bought one of those genuine Frigidaire replacement for $101, it failed after about 3 months, and they were kind enough to put in some pictures of what the genuine one looked like versus the one that they pulled out from the factory that replaced it. And the key thing that they pointed out was these loops of wire. You see how these are arched way above that plate? Now this is one that claims to be a genuine part. I paid $142 for this silly thing at a parts store, appliance parts store yesterday. This one has the nice big loops, and the one that they showed that was the Amazon Frigidaire genuine part, those loops were not there. The wires went basically straight across from one coil to the other. It literally was almost touching that metal mounting plate, stabilizer plate, and that's what caused theirs to fail. And they had paid the $101 for that genuine part. I have not seen pictures of any of the other $25 to $40 ones, but I decided I was going to suck it up in this one case and spend the money on a, quote, genuine part from a parts store. And it looks like that's what I'm going to get. Now, let me go over here. Here is the one that was installed 4 years ago. It appears also to be a good, quote, genuine part. It's got the loops. It looks like it should be. The problem obviously seems to, that design is not 100% foolproof. One would think that they would have thought to put another little mounting tab on the ends of this plate, the way they have these tabs come through here and here, which would prevent this from happening, which may prevent failure, but then again they couldn't charge us for replacements what can I say? If I had the time and inclination, I might actually try to modify this, but I don't have the time at the moment, so I'm going to have to slap this one in and hope that it gives me the 4 years of service almost that this one did, and we'll go from there.